in our barrel first. Okay, Zok the Helig the Mishnah, we have a new fresh start. We're learning about Shavuos Eidus, and it's a light Gemara today because there's a lot of Agadata, so it's Kishmak. Shavuos Eidus, the halacha is that if someone approaches his friend and says, you know Eidus that can be beneficial to me, and I want you to come to say Eidus on my behalf. And he denies and says, no, I don't know any Eidus for you. And he swears, even if he purposely violates that shvua, even if it's mazid, he brings a korban oil yared. That is the halacha. Now, if he swears, yeah, I know Eidus, but I refuse to come, that we learned is a shvua shav, and that he gets makos for right away because it's nishba levatel as a mitzvah. The shvua Eidus that we're talking about is someone who swears and he's denying that he knows anything. So zok the Mishnah, shvua Eidus no heges ba noshim v'loy b'noshim. Naturally, it only applies to somebody who's kosher leidus, and therefore, if someone's not kosher leidus, the whole sugya of Shavuos Eidus does not apply to them. Berechaykin of like bekroivim, only somebody who's not related. Biksharim, only someone who's a kosher of like psulim. The einin hagetz el berui lahoid b'fnei lahoid. It's only negay someone who was Eidus, which seems to be redundant because a moment ago we said v'loy b'psulim, so the Gemara is going to explain what that's referring to. B'fnei bezdin v'shaloi b'fnei bezdin. It doesn't matter if the shvua denying that he knows Eidus was made in bezdin or if it was just made on the street. It's the same chiyuv. Mipi atzmai u'mipi acherim. I'm sorry, mipi atzmai, period. If he swore on his own, I swear that I don't know any Eidus that can benefit you, wherever he swore, whether he swore this shvua in bezdin or if he swore it out of bezdin, it will be mechayiv him the korban of the But u'mipi acherim, if somebody was mashpia him and said, mashpiacha ani, that you don't know Eidus, and he agrees, then ein chayovin achi yichperu behen bebest. If it's a shvua mipi acherim that they're being mashpia him, that only will be mechayiv from the other yard if this occurred in best. Divrei Reb Meir, that is the shita of Reb Meir. But v'chachamim ma'amrim bein mipi atzmi or bein mipi acherim, it doesn't matter how the shvua was made. Einon chayovin achi yichperu behen bebest. The halacha of a korban oil yard brought for a shvua bar Eidus only applies if all of this occurred within the walls of a bezdin. The chayovin al zodoin hashvua val shigasa. He's mechuyev even if he knows that he's violating the shvua. He knows that he's swearing false. It's amazing. He's still chayiv because the three different types of averos that bring a korban oil yared are tumas mikdash v'kadoshov. Where the Torah says in Nelam, he forgot that he was Tameh. By a Shavuos Bitoy, where the Torah says in Nelam, he forgot that he made a Shvuah. But when the Torah talks about the Shavuos Eidus, the Torah does not use the words in Nelam. Meaning, even if you didn't forget, even if it's an absolute mazid, one still brings a korban oil yared. Val shibagasa imzot neidus. Who didn't if it's shogeg? Now, it's very important, we're going to learn in a second, that if I forgot that I had, Reuven goes to Shimon and says, you know Eidus that will benefit me, I want you to say Eidus. Shimon forgot. He saw Eidus for Reuven, but he forgot. And he made a shvua. That's not called shogeg. That's called oinus. And we had an example of an oinus where Rav and Rav Kahana had a disagreement as to what their Rebbe taught them, what Rebbe said. And each one was so sure that they were right, they made a shvua that I'm right. And then when they went to Rebbe and Rebbe said, no, you're right and you're wrong, the one that was wrong said, Oy I made a Shavuos Sheker. And Rebbe said, no, you didn't. Because libcha anoscha, that's called an oinus. So therefore, so what is shogeg then? So the Gemara said, what is shogeg? If shogeg doesn't mean you forgot that you know the information, so what is shogeg? The Gemara said, shogeg means you forgot that this avera comes with a chiyuv of a chatas, or a korban oil yared. So that's what it means. You know you're lying, but you didn't know that you'd be mechuyev a korban. Im zadon the edus, even if it was mazid. The einon chayovin al shigasa. But if you completely forgot that you knew this edus, and when you swore, you thought you were swearing the truth, that's an edus, and for that one would not be chayiv a korban oil.
Why doesn't he say
You want to know why the Tana expressed it this way? I don't know. Umahin chayovin. I could suggest a reason is because of Ibal by a Shavuos Bitoy. You're only mechuyev for a shoygeg, and this is and this is not a shoygeg, so it wants to use the same nusach as it uses by a Shavuos Bitoy, where you mechuyev a carbon, and there the shoygeg means that you didn't know that it would be a chiv carbon. Umahin chayavin. So what is the chiv? Alzad in the Shavuot carbon oila v'yoyred. Beautiful. We started off by saying that women are posulados. How do we know that women are posulados? And we're going to have 5 different brises that approach it from a different angle and all come out with the same conclusion. The Tana Rabbanan. It says v'omdu shnei ha'anoshim. Now, if you look at the psukim in Dvarim, I believe it's in Re'eh, the pasuk starts talking about Edom, and talking all about Edom. And then the pasuk continues and says, "Va'omdu shnei ha'anoshim." And if you look at the pasuk in its entirety, it says, "Va'omdu shnei ha'anoshim asher lahem ariv lefnei Hashem lefnei hakayanim v'shoivtim asher yiyu b'yom mahim." So it's, if you read the pasuk with pashas, it sounds like it's talking about the Balei Din, but we say no. The Amdu Shnei Anoshim is referring to the Friedik Psukim that was in the topic of Edom. Asher Lahem Ariv is also talking about the Balei Din. So that's what the limud is. Amdu Shnei Anoshim be'Edom HaKosef V'daber. Zok Gemara at Oymer be'Edom or Ein El Balei Din. Maybe talking about the Balei Din. Zok Gemara Kishu Oymer Asher Lahem Ariv Harei Balei Din Namar. That's already referring to the Balei Din. Hamani Mikayim V'Amdu Shnei Anoshim. It's be'edim ha'kosef v'daber, teaching you that edim have to be anoshim. V'im nafshech loimer, and if you don't like this pshat, I have another raya that shnei anoshim is referring to edim. Nemer kan shnei anoshim. The nemer lahalon, which really means in the pasuk prior, it says I'll be shnei edim yakum davar malalo be'edim afkan be'edim. Frankly, more my im nafshech loimer. What wouldn't I like about the first pshat that you're falling back on the Xeris Shava? If it said v'amdu shnei anoshim va'asher lahem ariv, then it would indicate talking about the 2 Edom and the 2 Balei Din, but it doesn't say that. It says it without the vav. So v'chitema v'loiksiv va'asher lahem ariv. V'aistachoi that kulei krabe Balei Dinim ishtoi. The whole pasuk is speaking about Balei Dinim, not about Edom. For that we have never kan shnei, never lahalon shnei malalom be'edim afkan be'edim. I'm sorry? Again, be'edim ha'kosef v'daber. Atamir be'edim, oina ela b'valadin. Amrit, v'chishnayim boim ladin, shloish ein boim ladin. By a din Torah, it's not only one another guy. Some parties can have multiple people. So it says, we're talking about people that it's only negated to. So who's the people only negated to? It must be Edom. Because if it's Balei Din, it's lavik of Shnayim, there can be a bit large parties. Vim navshach loymar, and if you don't like it, shat nemer kan shnei v'nemer halon shnei malal be'edim avkan be'edim. Mam navshach loymar. Why wouldn't I like it, shat? V'chitema maybe b'toiveya b'nitva kamishtoikra. The shnei means the 2 parties, not the 2 people. Therefore, we still have a pasuk nemer kan shnei v'nemer halon shnei malal be'edim avkan be'edim. So Tosfos points out, I don't understand. If sometimes there's more than 2 Edom that see something. So the same question you ask that there's more than 2 Balei Din, you can say the same thing with Edom. Zok Tosfos very, very simply. Zok Tosfos, if you're a party to a court case that's relevant to you, you're going to be there. Even if you don't need to be there, even though if somebody is arguing the case for you, you want to be there. You want your presence seen. You want to see what's going on firsthand. But if you're one of a group of many people who saw something, as long as there's 2 Edom going, you're probably not going to bother going. So therefore, the word shnei is more appropriate to apply to Edom than it is to apply to Balei Din. Tanya Yidich, v'amdu shnei ha'anoshim, be'edom ha'kosef v'daber, it's referring to Edom. Atoimer be'edom oy eino ela b'balei dinin. Amrit v'chi anoshim boim l'din, noshim ein bois l'din. That was what Chaim mentioned earlier. When you talk about Balei Dinin, men are no more Balei Din than women are. So why would it use a lotion of anoshim when you're talking about Balei Din? Elamai, it must be speaking about Edom, and it's telling you that Edom must be male. Vim nafshech loimer, and if you don't like this pshat, we can fall back on the Xeris Shava again. Nemer kan shnei, nemer lahal shnei, malalom Edom of kam Edom. Frankly, more my why wouldn't I like the first shot that Anoshim can't be referring to the Baladin because women can be Baladin. So Isha lav oich archa. Normally, a woman wouldn't go to the Torah. If she has a Din Torah, she would hire a representative. Mishum kol kvuda bas melech pnima. Therefore, nemer kan shnei v'kam shnei mal al beidim of kamedim. Frank Tosus, once you've neutralized anoshim, and you say anoshim could refer to women as well, but since kol kvuda bas melech pnima, even when we're talking about a woman who's a party to a Din Torah, it uses the word anoshim. So then you've neutralized the raya. So even by Adam, since the Sheker is not the norm for women to go out, therefore it says Anoshim. But who said that means to disqualify Noshim? The same way Legabe Baladin, you're saying Anoshim does not disqualify Noshim. Why would you say that it disqualifies Noshim Legabe Adam? Zoktais is very, very simple. A woman who has to fight an entire doesn't have to attend a person. She can hire a good lawyer. But if you're an aide, you can't send somebody and say aid me P8, that's not good testimony. She's got to be there herself. So therefore, if it says Anashim, it's a raya that it doesn't mean women, because if it did mean women, it should say Noshim as well, because she, even if it's called Kvud Bas Melech Pnima, that's till there's a Chiv Eidos. When there's a Chiv Eidos, she's got to be invested. Tanu Rabban. Va'omdu Shnei HaNoshim. It says Va'omdu Shnei HaNoshim. We learn from here that it's a mitzvah Levale Dinim Sheyamdu. The Balei Din have to stand. I heard if the Dayan wanted to allow both of the Baladin to sit, Moshivin, you can let them sit. It's funny because the first organized justice system in the history of the world was by Klal Yisrael. But even secular courts, all rise, everyone comes in, and then the judge says, you may be seated. So they probably are following protocol that was established in the Jewish court system. So what is Aser? If the Dayan allows one party to stand and one party, it forces one party to stand and allows one party to sit, or Echad V'daber Kol Tzarcha, he allows one party to elaborate and articulate their full arguments, and for the other guy, he shows a lack of patience. Don't right? That spooks the person who feels like he's being discriminated against, and he won't be able to properly articulate his position, and that's corrupt, and therefore that is not allowed to happen. Taner Rabbanan, b'tzedek tishboit amisecha. We learn from here, shelo yehi echad yoshev ve'echad oimed. The Dayan must make sure that he treats them both fairly. Or echad medaber kol tzarkoi ve'echad oimer loy katzer devarecha. Davar acher b'tzedek tishboit amisecha. This is not only talking about a bezin, this talks about every person. You should always give a fellow yid the benefit of the doubt. If it's a shomer Torah mitzvahs, such a person, you have to be done a kafschus. To what extent does someone have to be done a kafschus? So there's a beautiful Gemara in Shabbos of Kaf Chuv Zayin and Beis that shares 3 stories of what it means to dan the kafschus. The first story was about a person who Rabbi Akiva Eiger identifies as Akiva ben Yosef, and I wonder if Rabbi Akiva Eiger is biased to say he's referring to Akiva ben Yosef. And he lived up in the Upper Galil, maybe he lived in Tzfas, and he took a job in the south. So maybe he took a job in Afula, I don't know. And right, he took a job in Afula, took a job up south, and he worked on a 3-year contract. And the last day of his contract was on Erev Yom Kippur. He finished his contract, and he wants to go home, and he wants to get paid. So he goes over to the Balabais, and he says, "Could you please pay me? I was away for 3 years. I want to come to be mefarnes my wife and children." So the Balabai said, "I'm really sorry. I don't have a penny on me. I don't have no money." You know, you knew that the guy's leaving after 3 years. Like, maybe you should prepare money. That I don't know. Then he said, "Okay, son, you don't have money. Maybe you have a behema that you can give me." "No, I don't have a behema." So, "Okay, maybe you have land." "I don't have any land." "Maybe you have Paris." "I don't have any Paris." He said, "Maybe you have at least have a bedding, a pillow, a mattress." "I have nothing." So he was despondent. He felt terrible. He packed his bags and he came home empty-handed. And he told his wife, I was working for 3 years and I didn't get paid. And she said, oh, yeah, I don't believe that for half a second. You're going into the doghouse. Who knows if you've been fooling around for the last 3 years? But so what happened was is right after Yom Tov, this Balabai shows up with 3 fully loaded chamorim of food and drink and desserts. And he said, first come, let's have a whole meal together. And he wined and dined his employee, and then he paid him in full. And then he asked his employee, he asked Akiva, tell me the truth. When I first told you I have no money, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? She said, you know what I was thinking? I thought that you were in the mikveh, and someone gave you a hot stock tip, and you took all your money, and you quickly put it into that stock. And that's why you had no cash. So he says, I could swear that's exactly what happened. Not the mikveh part. Not the mikveh part.
Finish the whole story.
Then he said, okay, and what did you think? What did you think when I said I don't have any behemoths? He said, I thought that you rented your behemoths out, so you didn't have available behemoths. And what did you think when I said I don't have land? I thought that you rented your land out as well. And what did you think when I said I have no korban k'sasa? He said, I thought maybe you were makdish them. So he says, I can promise that's exactly what the case was. So even though it was this combination of events was so unlikely, he still was melamed zchus, and he said after all this, I went and I was shoyal on my neder to make everything hefker, and that's why I came with all my goodies to come now. The second story was a story about somebody who had to. It was b'chosar echad, and Rashi says that whenever it's a chosar echad, it refers to Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, who he had to redeem. There was a Jewish girl that was held captive, and he traveled far to redeem her. And when he brought her back, he had her sleep in his room, even though he should have had her sleep by his talmidim, where there wouldn't be a problem of yichud. He had them sleep in her room, and he slept in the same room as her, and the next morning before Shir, he went to the mikveh. So right away, imagine what everyone should think. When he started to say Shir, he asked them, first of all, what were you thinking when you saw that I took her into my room and didn't put her in a public place? So they said, you know what we thought? We thought that you didn't vet all the talmidim, and you were afraid one of the talmidim would abuse her, would molest her, so that's why, for safety reasons, you kept her by you. And then he said, and what did you think the next morning when they had to go to the mikveh first? So they said, Vastachos, they weren't chassidish, they didn't go to the mikveh every morning. If he went to the mikveh, it was a sign that he had to do a tefillah. So he says, you know what we thought? We thought you worked so hard the day before, schlepping and running to do the pidyon and shvuyim. Sometimes, from exhaustion, a person could see zera. And that's what we thought happened. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava told the Talmidim, Muftachani, that's exactly what happened. The third story was there was some type of issue that they needed a representative of the community. They had to go speak to this mitranusa. This mitranusa was a very powerful woman. They had to go talk kihilish business with her. Now, how did she get to the top? The way she got to the top is the same way Jeffrey Epstein got to the top, by doing horrible mitzvahs and ma'asim tovim. So she knew the insides and outsides of every single powerful person in Rome. So she basically had all the rulers of Rome in her back pocket because she had intimacy with all of them. And so the question is, who was going to go? So don't think that everybody was volunteering to go. Nobody wanted to go until Rabbi Yeshua said, I'm going to go. So Rabbi Yeshua went with his talmidim, and then in those days they used to wear tefillin the whole day. When he got within 4 amos of her home, he took off his tefillin, and he went into her home, and he closed the door behind him. He came out an hour later, and he said, oh, I have to go to the mikveh. I'm not sure why she had a mikveh outside her home, unless she had Jewish clients. But he went to the mikveh right after. So right away he asked him, what did you think when you saw I took off my tefillin? What did you think I was planning? So they said, you know what we thought? We thought that since you were going into her home, which we know is a mokum tameh, you felt that the heilig tefillin shouldn't go in, so you took them off. And what did you think when I went in and closed the door? We thought that you had a very serious malchustic issue to discuss that needed privacy, because otherwise she wouldn't be counted. She would think someone's listening in. And what did you think when they came out and went to the mikveh? She says, we thought that while she was speaking to you, some saliva came out of her mouth and touched your beged, and we know that all goyim have a status of a zova gedoyla, and you became tamei, and that's what you told. So Rabbi Shua said that's exactly what happened. So this is to the level of how a person has to be melamed schus. Zog to more weiter. Oh, before we started, I wanted to mention something very interesting about this week's parsha. In this week's parsha, the Torah talks about the fact that the Levium redeemed the Bechoros. The problem was there were more Bechoros than there were Levium. So what did the Torah say? For all the extra Bechoros that don't have a Levi to Leizemois, they have to give 5 shkolim, right? Correct Rashi, everyone's going to say, let Yenna give the 5 shkolim. I have a Levi. So what they did is they made a girl. And let's say, this is not the right accurate number, but for simplicity, let's say that they were 9,000 Levim, but 10,000 Bechoros. So there's 1,000 short. So they took 1,000 little pieces of paper, 1,000 kvitlach, on 9,000, he took 10,000 kvitlach, on 9,000 he wrote Levi, and on 1,000 he wrote 5 shkolim. And then he put them all into a big basket, and then everyone came and picked one out. If you picked Levi, then you didn't have to give shkolim. If you picked 5 shkolim, problem is that's not fair, because the earlier you got to pick, the better of a chance you would have of picking Levi. So it's not fair. So we learned this in Sanhedrin of Yud Zayin. There was another girl that was a similar situation, which was the girl when Yeshua split up Eretz Yisrael. So I think the Ben Yehoyada says there that the first guy came and he picked out a kvittel, and it either said Levi or it said 5 shkolim. He didn't walk away with the paper. He put the paper back in. And then the next guy. So every single member of the 10,000 Bechoros pulled it out of the same full pool. Because Baruch Hu made al PNS that it should work out that 9,000 picked Levi and 1,000 picked.
Itself was talking.
Right, so the girl too. There was multiple layers. If you learn the more, there were multiple layers of verification. The Novi said Baruch HaKodesh, what's going to happen first, and especially when they split up Israel. And then the girl spoke, and in this there was multiple layers to give it authenticity. Yeah, it's right there in the Shas. It's right there. Look, it's right there. It's in the Shas. Zok the Gemara. Rav Ula Bared Rav Eloi, Havalei Dina Kamed Rav Nachman. Rav Ula was going to be going to Din Torah, and Rav Nachman was going to be the Dayan. So Rabbi Yosef wrote Rav Nachman a letter about what a great person Ula is. Shalach le Rabbi Yosef, Ula Chavereinu, our friend Ula, Amis b'Torah v'mitzvahs. He's great in Torah and mitzvahs. He's loaded up. So Rabbi Nachman said, why is he sending this to me? Is he trying to smear the Dayan? Amar l'mai shalach li l'chanufa ele. Hadamar. Then Rabbi Nachman said, no, that's not what he's sending it to me for. Avad Rabbi Yosef wouldn't want to do something inappropriate. It was lemishra b'tigrei, either because there's halacha, if there's multiple waiting for the Torah and there's Talmidei Chachamim, the Talmidei Chachamim get pulled out of the line early. Not only if they all came at the same time, but there are Rishonim who hold, even if there's a lineup and they're last on the line, the Dayan still has to pull them out to the front, similar to a Gvir waiting for a Rebbe. And there's even a sheet in the Rishonim who holds that even if the Bezdin is in the middle of paskening on the case and Talmidei Chacham walk in, they put the case that they're in the middle of on hold and they take the Talmidei Chacham. So there's a shaila in the Rishonim to what extent it is. But that's why Rabbi Yosef sent to Rabbi Nachman that Ula Talmidei Chacham is l'mishra b'tigrei so that he should get priority boarding. However, there's another reason why Rabbi Yosef might have done this. Zok to Gemara inami le shuda dedaini. Shuda dedaini is a very fascinating concept in halacha. There's a machlokes Rashi and Tosfos about it. What happens if someone writes in his will, I want to leave my estate to Tuvia, and in that city there are 2 Tuvias, and there's no indication which Tuvia should be getting this gift. So Bezdin passes with Shuda dedaini. And it's a machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. Rashi says the Dayan has to assess who they think the Noishes Matana wanted to give it to. They have to see who do we feel they would have wanted to give it to. Tosfos says, how could they possibly know who he wanted to give it to? So Tosfos Shuda Dayan means the Dayan have a right to pick on their own whoever they want to give it to. So regardless of how you learn Shuda Dayan, the Rabbi Yosy was trying to let Rabbi Nachman know that Ula was the Talmid Chacham, which is a reason why either the Dayanim would want to give it to Ula, or whether the original Noisen would have wanted to give it to Ula. Amar Ula, Machlokes b'Baladinim. This whole discussion as to whether or not the Baladinim could stand or sit is about the Baladinim. Aval ba'edim, but the edim divra koil ba'midah. Hands down, everybody agrees the edim have to stand by testimony. Tichsev ve'omdu shnei anoshim. It says so in the pasuk. Amar Rav Huna, machlokes b'shas masu mat. Even this discussion as to if the Baladinim are allowed to sit, that's only during the discussions, during the presentation of arguments, during maybe the deliberation. But when it comes time to issue the verdict, once again, in secular courts, the jury comes in, the judge says, please rise, or the court stenographer says, please rise, right? The defendant should please rise to hear the verdict. Again, they probably for sure got it from our justice system. The Chsiv, it says in the pasuk, "Vayoshev Moshe lishpoit esam." Moshe sat down, but vayamoy ta'am. Lishnachrina machlokes b'shas masu matan. Abu b'shas gmardin divrei hakoil dayonim b'yeshivu baladinim b'amidah. Why is that? Not because of the svara, the first lashon, because of the pasuk of Moshe, is to ha'edim kigmardin, and for them they could leave; they don't have to stay. So therefore, the Gemardin is the point where the Baldin gets his last piece of information. He's ready to leave after that. So that's why we're comparing the Haggadah Ha'edus to Gemardin. It says by Haggadah Ha'edus, V'yomdu Shnei Ha'anoshim. The visitor Rav Huna, the wife of the Heilige Talmid Chacham Rav Huna, Havaladina Kamed Rav Nachman. She had to attend the Din Torah in front of Rav Nachman. It's funny because she didn't send the shliach; she went herself. Omar, so Rav Nachman wasn't sure what to do. Really, I have to stand up for her because she's a Eshes Chaver. But if I stand up, Mistatmin Tanosi the Baldina. Her Baldina is going to think I'm showing favor, and it's going to corrupt the din. So what is your suggestion? I shouldn't stand up? Eshes Chaver, Harei Chaver. I'm going to stand up. So what should I do? He told the Shamus, well, let's make a plan over here. Say make some goose fly on me during the entire when they come in, so that I should stand up, and it'll look like it's a reaction to the bird flying in. The Ekman, I'll stand up. So this way I'm standing up for her, but it won't scare the Baldin. Frek Toisvis, the Chiyav of Kovid, it has to be noticeable. If it's not noticeable, then you weren't fulfilling your Kovid. So Frek Toisvis, let's look at Toisvis over here. Avagav de Be'inan Kimo Sheyesh Bahidur. But at least he doesn't have an isser for violating. So even though it's not Makayim the full heater by standing special for her, but at least it's not going to be an isser that he didn't stand for her. That's one shot. That she was a smart cookie herself. She knows that he really stood up for her. She chapped the whole business. So Mela, she got her covet, and she knew what was going on. Frank Gemara, Amar Mar, Machlokes b'shas masu matan, Aval b'shas k'mardin, Divra akol dayonim b'yeshiva ubaladinim b'amida. So how did Rab Nachman Firzich by the Gemardin? By the Gemardin, he would have been forced to make her stand, and he was going to sit. Zok to Gemara, the Yosef command the Shari Misane. What he did was he was sitting, but he was half standing. He was half standing as if he was tying his shoes. I'm not sure exactly what position it is, but it's like half standing, half sitting. And while he was half standing, half sitting, he issued a verdict. V'yomer is ploni at zakai, is ploni at chayv. Tosfos asks, the Gemara is going to say at the bottom of the Omud that a Talmud Chacham does not have to stand by the verdict. So Frank Tosfos avagav the yochel shiva, he could have let her sit. Kidamar b'samach. The asay that covered the Torah is other from the asay to stand. So why didn't he let her sit? So there's two reasons. Either this time tinus baldina, he's giving the verdict. There's no reason for him to tie anymore. But maybe there's still a concern. He's still worried about stimas. I'm not sure why. There's nothing you have to talk about. The arguments have been made, but still, as far as stimas, maybe he would have piped in to give more information. Oy Shema Ein Beishes Chaver Lachamisa Asay the Cover Torah Odif. What's that? Okay, geweldig. Sagt ik maar weiter, but you could hire a lawyer.
This week in the parsha says by Yisoschem Levil, so the Baltirim brings that to start in Shavuos, showed that Yisoschem Levil are mamish eins, because the will how to also same thing as the parsha.
It's interesting you say that because by the Koil dinner, there's a couple of years ago, Koil dinner, there were Mechaber Urin Rach to speak. And Urin Rach said, in a Yisachar Zvulun relationship, who is the better one? Yisachar or Zvulun? So everyone's Yisachar. But he said, no, Zvulun. Why? Why did Yisachar get involved in this relationship? What do he want to get out of it? Money. Why did Zvulun get involved in the relationship? What do he want to get out of it? Ruchnius. So in that relationship, Zvulun's better.
And you see, but because it says also, and all the Drayim, because they were near. So it said, and also, it said,
so there's that Torah as well. Amar Rabba Barafuna, Hai Turva Merabanon v'Amoritz. There's a Turva Merabanon, a Talmud Chacham, is going to the entire with an Amoritz. The Is Lahu Dina Bahad Edadi. So what do? Moishvini la the Turva Merabanon. But the Dayan has to tell Talmud Chacham, please, Rabbi Yankel, sit down. Now he can't discriminate. So Amoritz Nami Yamin Lativ. He'll tell the Amoritz, please sit down, sir. The Ikoi, and if the Amoritz wants to remain standing, less lamba, because there's no fear that he feels his tinies are being nistam, because the Dayan asked him to sit down as well. Yeah, the Mefarshim explained that you have to be maftzeboy. Even if he doesn't want to sit down, the Talmud Chacham, you have to tell him, sit down. But the Amoritz, you just tell him once. Okay. Here's a good story here. Rav Bar Shrav Yohavi Ladina Kamed Papa. Oisve, they gave him to sit. The Oisev Nami Lebaldine, and they also offered the Baldin to sit, and the Baldin sat down. What happens? He's sitting down, thinking he's doing perfectly. Also, Shlicha de Bedina, the court officer comes, Botashbe, he gave him a kick, and he said, what does it matter with you? You better stand up. Where's your honor? So you would think, or Papa should jump in and say, no, they're both allowed to sit. But Papa, Tiv, he didn't tell him he could sit down. How could Rav Papa allow this to occur in his court? Isn't this going to create fear that now this fellow won't be able to articulate his arguments? Omar Papa, no, it's not a problem. Meimar Omar, Iu ha'oisvan. The Dayan has nothing against me. Look, he sat me down. The Shliach doesn't like me. But as far as the Dayan, I'm fine. Which shows that they were not snowflakes in those days. Showing the Rebbe doesn't like me, but the Rebbe is fine. So I'm not such a snowflake. I'm not afraid. People were much tougher then. And you will see another example of that shortly. He shouldn't go sit down, meaning, let's say the entire is called for 1 p.m. The Talmud Chacham shouldn't come in early and start schmoozing with the Dayan. Because when his Baldin comes in and sees that the other Baldin is buddy schmoozing with the Dayan, it's going to scare him. We should the Mechse command the Sadir Leila Dinei. It seems like he's not talking in Talmud learning. The other Baldin will think that he's already preempted his tinus and he's not going to stand a chance. But V'loy Amrin, listen to this. V'loy Amrin El Deloy Kvila Idnei. That we say he shouldn't come early and shmooze the Dayan is if he didn't have a Seder Kavua with the Dayan. But if he has a Seder Kavu with the Dayan, less lamba, there's no problem. Maybe Armour, the Balban says, I'm not afraid that he's talking about the din. Big Torah, they have their Seder. Now, I don't know anybody in their right mind who would accept a Dayan who's the Chavrus of their Baldin, right? But in those days, the Vice Chavrus, there was a very high level of integrity, and the other Baldin wouldn't have any problem with it whatsoever, unless he's there at a time where he's normally not there, and then it looks like he's in. So I thought, so what I said was better. You know why the guy is not afraid? If he knows that this guy is a charusa to dying, why would he take him? He says, because you might be a charusa, but you don't know that I'm paying him off on the side. So he doesn't want to disqualify the dying. He only wants this dying. Sucks more weiter. V'omer Rabbi Bar Huna, Ha'ituvim Rabbanon, the Yoda b'Sahadusa. Talmid Chacham knows an edus that could be beneficial to a Baltin, but v'zila b'milsa l'meizel l'vedaina the zutimine la'sudikame. It's a pastem nish. Reb Chaim Kanevsky should come say edus in front of a regular small business. It's believed there's dignity. That Allah is loy lazel. He doesn't have to go. And we'll see in a moment, similar to Zokin Veni Levichvoida, he doesn't have to return an Aveda. Amar Pshisha Bareda Bidi Afanana Mitanina. Motza Sakra Kupa, Vein Darker Litoil. It's something that even if it was his own, he wouldn't have picked it up. Hareza Lo Yitoil, he doesn't have to pick it up. And therefore, this Talmid Chacham, he doesn't have to go. He doesn't have to go and say Edus in such a case. It's almost like a Salamta man. But Hanamili b'mamana, not only if it's an edus that will impact someone either collecting money or not collecting money. I will be surah. Rashi, what if it's a woman who's an aguna and she's going to get a heter to get married, and this gadol knows that her husband's still alive, so he has to prevent this woman from remarrying when she's a neshishish. And therefore, you say in chachma vein tfuna v'neitel oleged Hashem kol mokem sheish b'chila Hashem ein chalkin kovid l'rav. And who didn't when there's a shaila being over an iser ein chalkin kovid l'rav. He's got to go. So there's a whole discussion. What if it was flipped around? What if she was trying to get a heter aguna, and he knows that the husband did die? Is he mechuyev to come? So the Rishonim discussed it because that's also Yisura. The discussion has to come, and then they ask every moment. This is also Yisura because if this guy's entitled to the money, he's not overly so. If he's entitled to the money, then he is. If he's not entitled, he's overly so. So every moment is automatically Yisura. So the Rishonim say that since moment is nitan limchol, you could be moichelit. Therefore, it wouldn't be Isur.
Justice isn't going to be done
Correct.
if he doesn't show up.
That's right, and the Aveda will not be returned to its proper owner if he doesn't pick it up and return it. So sometimes a Zokim Ve'en Avoda, he doesn't have to do it. And if Hashem wants Dasha to be done, Hashem will make it that another aid will show up.
I understand. If, when a regular person is mechuyev in the mitzvah, but a Talmid Chacham is patur from the mitzvah, he should be the first one to do the mitzvah.
Well, we have that by Shavuos Veit as well.
I know.
So Moti asked me today, I don't understand. Why should it be beneath anyone's dignity? Who would have a problem with their pride about going to Bezdin? I said, I think very soon you should be on that madrega. But it's very schwer. But you see, the Torah tells us that a Zokim Ein L'Chavoda, and I think the litmus test is, would he do it for himself? If this knapsack was his and he wouldn't pick up his own knapsack, so that's a litmus test. As Ein L'Chavoda, she didn't have to do it for somebody else. So maybe you have the same litmus test with Eidos. If it's something that he would do for himself, then he has to do it for Yener. But if it's something that he wouldn't do for himself, you're not machayiv him to do it for Yener. But yeah, it's a little hard because, like you said, the greater somebody is, the more he should want to apply.
Right.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive.
The picture of the establishment like that.
Well, Beryl told me that he remembers that he once walked with the Lubavitch Rebbe into an apartment building where the Lubavitch Rebbe's mother lived. He used to go visit his mother. And Beryl, please correct me if I'm wrong. And on the main floor, there was a painter who was painting on the third floor, and he had his ladder and his paint, and he was going to be carrying it up the stairs. And the Lubavitch Rebbe grabbed the paint and says, "Come, let's bring it up." And he helped slip the paint up for the painter. Beryl, is that a true story? Am I saying it right? You're muted, so I can't hear you. Beryl will tell us the story. He was right there.
I wasn't there, but they used to tell the story in the yeshiva of people who were there who saw it.
So what was the story? Say it over. I want to hear it from you.
But he came to visit his mother, and the painter was standing in front of the building. And the Lubavitch Rebbe saw he had 5 gallons of paint. So he said, "I'll help you." And they schlepped it up to the 5th floor.
Wow. Unbelievable. Okay, gewaltig. Shkoyach.
Also, if thousand in
Jüdische paint oder goyische paint?
What?
A jüdische paint oder goyische paint?
Nicht kein paper. What's paper?
Painter, the Mensch gewinnt a Jid oder the Mensch gewinnt a Goy?
Sicher gewesen Ayid.
Okay. Maar dat is gezond.
Listen, he was Lubavitcher. If it wasn't the Yid, he could have made him a ger. Zok
Rabbi
no. Rabbi Yemer have a yoda leis hadusa lamar zutra. Rabbi Yemer knew something that would be beneficial for Mar Zutra. So he came to say this. Also, look, he came to a Meimar. A Meimar was a dying. He let everybody sit. He let the Baladin sit. He let the Adam sit. How could you do that? So how could you let the Adam sit down? There's an assay to stand. There's also a mitzvah to say, I say the cover Torah Adif. Correct Toysfus in the Gemara Sanhedrin, it relates a story with Yanai Hamelach. Cover Hamelach is for sure greater than cover HaTorah, and the story with Yanai Hamelach is that he was summoned to Bezdin because his slave was accused of killing somebody, and he had to stand. And the Dayan told him, "You must, Yanai Hamelach, you must stand here." So if it's not doiche cover Hamelach, how could it be doiche cover HaTorah? So Tosfos says, so how could cover Torah be stronger? Zok Tosfos, and I'll be your right that cover Torah is weaker because a Talmid Chacham can be moichel al kvoidai, a melech can't. Zok Tosfos, first of all, that was din in the fashis, so could be din in the fashis is different. But the other Zok Tosfos, just because the Talmid Chacham can be moichel on his cover, it doesn't mean his cover is less chomer. His cover is more chomer. You know why a Talmid Chacham can be moichel? Because it's his. He learned the Torah. He got it. But a melech, he didn't earn it. It was given to him, and therefore he cannot be moichel. Taner Rabbanan, minayin l'dayin shelo yasas negrin. What if a dayan comes up and passes a certain position, but then he realizes that he might have made a mistake? So the natural tendency of a person is to come up with different supports and rise that he's right. Even though deep down inside he's not sure, and what he should really be doing is look at it with a fresh look, without any preconceived ideas, and really analyze it objectively. That's what he's supposed to do. He's not supposed to just try to find different ways to prove that he was right. In other words, Rashi says, even though he'll be boish, even though it's going to cause him embarrassment, that they have to retract his position, his embarrassment should not be a factor. It should be only seeking the truth. So, Midvar Sheker Tirchak. A dayan who's paskening, even if he has talmidim, a Talmud bor he shouldn't let sit there. You know why? Because he's going to fadrei makop with bad ideas, bad svars, and it's going to mess things up. In other words, a person needs to surround themselves with good people who offer good ideas, not with losers. So imagine he tells Talmud, please move away. Why? It says Midvar Sheker Tirchak. Or minayin l'dayin she'yidei l'chaver shu gaslin. What if a dayan knows that his friends are gaslin? He should not sit on the same bezin as him. V'chein eid she'yidei b'chaver shu gaslin. He shouldn't sit. He shouldn't say ages together with him. Minayin shlo yitztaref imoy tamid loyim b'dvar sheker tirchak. Everybody knows the famous story with somebody who wrote a sefer and he wanted to get haskama from the Rogachover. So the Rogachover took a long piece of paper and on the top he wrote 2-3 lines of beautiful haskama, and then he signed his name all the way down at the bottom. So the Mechaber Sefer asked him, why don't you sign underneath your haskama? So he says, what if the dayan knows that something's fishy? There's Adim, and you have all of the check boxes on your spreadsheet, everything on your checklist, everything stems, you have Adim, but something doesn't smell right. How do you know that the dayan should not continue accepting the Adim and paskin al pi Adim, even though he's going by the book? If he feels through his sixth sense that something is not right here, he shouldn't say, listen, I have Adim, I have whatever protocol requires. I'm going to paskin, I'll cut the din. It might be false. That's not on my head. That's on the Adim said. Is it false? The high collar and the collar of the shackles for this Avera will be totally b'tzavar Adim because they said falsely. Dayan has to know if something doesn't smell right, even though he could just go by the book, he can't go by the book because he knows that something is not right here. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we were zoichet to finish Daf Lamed, and tomorrow we'll learn Daf Lamed Aleph. So it's not loy with the Aleph. We're going to learn it.
What's plan?
Shkoyach.
Shkoyach.
Das last in Shvi.
And I get Yontif.
Yeah, try to have a good Yom Tov, have a wonderful, wonderful Yom Tov. Shavuos morning, but a Kaisel is like wow. So you'll get to see it and feel it firsthand.